Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Life in the Red podcast, presented by the Lincoln Journal-Star. Luke Mullin and Amie Just back at you once again for episode 8 for this season we've been doing so far. And today we'll get into everything related to that Oklahoma game, what changes, Mickey Joseph will be plotting during this bye week, the current state of the team right now, and we'll get a little bit of fun discussion in at the end, talking about Nebraska, the Big Ten West.
Fun!
Yeah, definitely really fun talking about coach firings and bottom-dwelling Big Ten teams. But hey, it's where we're at.
That is where we're at.
So let's get right into it. I mean, the game here on Saturday, this was obviously a one that, Husker fans, if you're anybody who grew up, 90s, thousands, whatever it may be, even further back than that, of course, you remember the great Oklahoma teams, or even the ones that would just stomp Nebraska, whatever it may be. So, just a game people were looking forward to for a long time. And, there was some hope in the air, but it didn't really pan out, did it?
No, it didn't last very long. The pregame scene, so I was on the field for most of pregame, and the student section chanting for Mickey, and Mickey running out of the tunnel with his arms in the air for his first, time leading the tunnel walk. It's only human to get chills for those moments, just because, yes, it has been an absolute dumpster fire for the last 2 weeks leading into this, but that was just such a positive moment that there was a hope, if only for a moment, before the game. And even leading into the game for the first little bit, when Nebraska actually had a stop on Oklahoma's first drive, and then pieced together like a 77 or so yard touchdown drive to take the lead against Oklahoma, and you're like, oh my gosh, is this happening? No, it was not happening. It was not meant to be. It was like the football version of a false spring, so to speak, before winter rears its head for 6 more weeks.
Well, I would say, that after that first touchdown, I would say, I think that's the loudest Memorial Stadium has been this season.
Oh, for sure.
Not saying a whole ton with the performances, that they had out there in the first 2 non-conference games before that, but it like you said, there was an air of hope. It was, everybody was excited to get out there and see, if Mickey really could lead a big upset, make sure that they were competitive. But hey, I guess the bright side, the streak of 1-score loss is now over. Put it behind you. Get blown out by 35. So that'll be. It was a different type of performance for sure. The Sooners, just going fast on offense in that first half. It was, it was one of those things where obviously, Huskers played with good tempo. Georgia Southern played with a pretty decent tempo week before that, but Nebraska just couldn't match up to that Sooner front. They were doing a great job mixing the passes, the runs, and pretty much like we've seen all season. It was whatever they threw at Nebraska. They just kind of executed it with ease.
Well, yeah, Nebraska's defense is so bad. They're the worst Power 5 defense in the country right now. Not great. So, and then the only teams in the entire FBS that are worse than them are from Conference USA and MACtion.
Yeah.
So that's where you want to be.
Well, I feel like, if you look at the Oklahoma game a week before that, Kent State, they were only leading Kent State 7-3 at halftime, 35-7 against Nebraska. So, yeah, read into that what you will. And pretty much, I guess the only kind of a merciful thing, Venables didn't run up the score. There was ample opportunity for him to do so, especially if you wanted to keep some of those starters out there in the third quarter. For a while, it was looking like Oklahoma was going to get 650, 700 yards of offense. Well, things kind of toned down there late in the game. The final total, only 580 yards of offense allowed by the Huskers. And I thought what was really interesting, we heard from Mickey on Tuesday, and he was reflecting back on the game a little bit, and he said he wishes, the offense could have slowed themselves down a bit more in the first half, take away some of their own tempo, less quick possessions, that would have really helped the defense out.
Yeah, just slow things down. Because your defense isn't going to get the stops. So you want to get them as much rest as possible and just slow things down, drain out the play clock, and it would have helped a little, but I don't know if it would have changed the result.
It would have been like 28-7 at halftime instead of 35, something like that. So
I mean, Oklahoma had 8-9 possessions in the first half, something like that. It's not what you want for your defense.
Yeah.
Even if they're playing great, even if they're one of the best defenses in the country, you don't want that. It's not good because you're going to tire them out. Even if you do put the backups in later.
And I think it's one of those things where they've been built on tempo. That's what they were practicing all year. So I mean, if you were going to do something where you huddle up every down, you run that play clock down to 8-10 seconds. I mean, not that they couldn't handle it, but it would have been different for sure. So bye week, 2 weeks to prepare for your next opponent. That's probably where they try to implement stuff like that. And we'll get into that a little bit more. Want to talk about some of the young players who saw the field first, because really, that's a great chance, these blowouts, to get players on the field. Obviously they would have preferred, maybe not to be in that circumstance, obviously, but really good chance. I mean, Chubba Purdy out there threw an interception, also ran for a touchdown. I mean, just a guy who's a redshirt freshman, only a few games of college football experience under his belt. So, I mean, that was a good chance for him to get out there because Nebraska might need him again. Yeah,
I mean, you never know. If everything had gone according to plan, right, it would have been the inverse situation against North Dakota. Yep. And that's when we would have seen these guys. But, that game was far too close for far too long for Scott Frost and company to feel the need to throw those guys in there. But yeah, I liked most of what I saw from Chubba. Obviously, that interception, not so great. But, he showed off that he had his wheels with that rushing touchdown. And, so far so good. Again, it is against the backups to the backups, right? But game reps are game reps. And I think that's important for not just Chubba, but for anybody in particular who got some reps last week.
Absolutely. Yeah, I thought he looked good out there as well. But I think running back was the really more important position because we learned this week A.J. Allen going to be out for the season, collarbone injury that he suffered there against Oklahoma. And so Gabe Ervin, talented freshman last year, suffered a season-ending injury early in the year as well. So a few parallels there. Only saw 4 snaps against North Dakota, 2 against Georgia Southern. Was on the field for 19 snaps last week, and you could figure he's probably going to be in line for workload like that. Jaquez Yant was also on the field for 8 snaps there against Oklahoma. But definitely with Allen out, I mean, he'd been a great change of pace runner there behind Anthony Grant. So Ervin, he's going to be the guy that we presume steps into that role.
Yeah, and Mickey even said so. So I'm going to go with that, right?
You're going to believe the head coach? Yeah.
Who better to ask? I mean, maybe he's, doing some mind games, but believe him until he shows you not to believe him, I guess.
Yeah. I think Ervin's been third on the totem pole for whatever, throughout the season anyway. So we'll look forward to see what he can do. And along the offensive line, the other kind of big season-ending injury, Teddy Prohaska, his first week out last week. Ethan Piper and Kevin Williams, they were the guys who got a lot of increased playing time, season-high snaps for the two of them, working at left guard. And, the offensive line was probably, I think, the one position group on offense that they pretty much kept the same. Hunter Anthony, a guy who's played just a few snaps. First 3 weeks, he didn't get out there last week. Henry Lutovsky, who's rotated at right guard, played a similar amount of snaps. So not too much changing up there in terms of the backup seeing the field. But again, with Prohaska out, we'll see Piper, we'll see Williams, we'll see those guys again. But on defense, there are quite a few, I think, backups or guys playing their biggest role this season. Azai Newsome on the defensive line, he got his first action this season. Jamari Butler, Blaze Gunnerson, those guys saw, pretty much the same amount of snaps they saw 2 weeks ago. And then at linebacker, Millard South product Gage Stanger got to make his Nebraska debut. Pretty cool for the true freshman Super State pick here last year. And lastly, in the defensive backs, Sean Singleton, Brandon Moore, Malcolm Hartzog, all three of those guys, again, season high snaps. And Mickey said it. He said, we're going to look at those young guys, look at the film, see who can get out there on the field more.
Yeah, especially on the defensive side, just because Mickey has not been shy about airing his grievances about the miscues on defense. And I would expect some changes on the two deep. I don't know if starters will change, but I would expect some different faces, at least rotating and moving forward. And maybe it's some of these guys. I'm not sure, but we'll figure it out. And he wants to figure it out. And
I mean, to a certain degree, it's like, I mean, what do you really have to lose? Obviously, the starters haven't been getting it done. Give the young guys a chance. Maybe there's some growing pains there too, but definitely worth the risk.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get much worse. You are already at the bottom of the Big Ten West, which right now, as it stands, looks to be one of the worst divisions in Power 5.
Yep.
Not great.
So changes, adjustments need to be made on that defense. They'll get into it here during the bye week, and of course, we got to talk about it. Defensive coordinator Eric Chinander fired on Sunday, marking the second straight week. We had a Sunday firing, Scott Frost a week before that. And to me, it was one of those things, Chins, as the team calls him, was really well liked. I mean, he was a great coach.
Us too.
Yes, great coach for everybody in the building. Very personable. He was always willing to talk to the media, shed some light on the defense. But obviously this season, the results just weren't good enough. The bottom 5 defense nationally. And to me, the big thing too, I mean, you looked at his scheme at UCF. We heard about it, when Frost brought his entire staff over. The defense was supposed to be aggressive. They were supposed to force turnovers and make it so that high tempo, offense could roll down the field, maybe get some short fields, have a lot of possessions. And really, I don't think that really translated at Nebraska.
Yeah, it didn't. And I feel like last year there were so many talented players on defense that kind of stop the bleeding a little bit. Like, they played well on defense last year, but they definitely have been exposed this year without, the litany of players that they lost.
Yeah, and I mean, we could get into all of them, of course, but I think JoJo is obviously the biggest one. I mean, he produced quite a few turnovers there in that nickel role, and just such a veteran player that could make a lot of plays. And when you lose that, when you go back to a sophomore who's getting his feet wet, that's a big adjustment, and we've seen that at a lot of positions. That's been I think a major factor in the regression from last year to this year. So the big thing, Bill Busch, he'll now be the acting defensive coordinator. Experienced with Joseph on that LSU staff. And Busch, Nebraska native, a guy who...
Pender.
Yeah, indeed. Pender represent. If you're here watching the pod, let us know. But obviously, he started at Nebraska, graduate assistant, came back here in the 2000s as well. So a guy who's going to be, I think, very eager for this challenge. Amy, what do you think kind of stands out about Busch and how he's going to attack this challenge?
So Busch has been either an acting defensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator a couple times before, but his resume is with safeties in the secondary. Mm-hmm. And that is where, Nebraska's defense needs a lot of help everywhere, but especially in the secondary. Those guys have been asked to do way too much on the field. Just you're on an island back there, but you're also helping in the run defense because the front hasn't been very good, and something needs to change there. And I think Busch he's coached the secondary forever. He was a secondary coach and special teams coach when he was here last time. And he has continued to do that just about everywhere he's been. So I feel like getting him in there will be super beneficial for the safeties and the nickels, just because they have not only another pair of eyes, right, in addition to Fisher, because that's way too big of a job for one person too. You're watching 5 guys and you are one person. Not optimal. It's just not going to work. You're going to miss things, right? And so getting Busch in there, I think, is going to be beneficial, especially for the secondary, as far as it translates to the rest of the defense. He's coached linebackers before, so that'll be helpful there too. But again, back when Frost was fired, I posed the question, how much can you change in such a short period of time with the people that you have on your team and the people you have on your staff? And we'll see. But I think out of everybody, if you were to let Chinander go, Bush was the best option.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think it's probably one of those things too where they're not going to, make a ton of new defensive calls. They're not going to, install a ton of new packages here in the next 2 weeks. I think they're going to look for the different circumstances in the game to maybe use different packages, different personnel groupings differently. And that's going to be the challenge. How do you make the most out of this roster as it is and move forward in those next 8 games? And obviously with his defensive role, somebody else needs to, work full time on the special teams group. That'll be special teams analyst Joey Connors. He'll take over in that full-time role. Saw that last week again. Mike Cassano, special assistant, wide receivers coach now after Mickey takes the head coach role. So 2 new on-field coaches there for Nebraska against Indiana when they come back. But before that, obviously this bye week could not come at a better time.
For the team, for us.
We've talked about it a little bit. I don't know that we've said it to them, but the Ireland hangover for everybody, kind of collectively involved. It took the team, took everybody, I think, some time just to get back to feeling normal, getting in your routine. And then you have, these close games. Frost gets fired. It has been a slog for this team over the first 4 weeks of the year. And they desperately need this time to reset.
Yeah, and I am no Division I athlete by any stretch of the imagination, but it took me 6 days to feel normal again. And some of the players, like Casey Thompson, got sick on the, coming back, which is super common for traveling. I get travel sick sometimes too. So it's just no rest for the wicked. And it's been tough for all of these guys and I don't think they anticipated just how difficult it was going to be to come back.
Yeah.
Because originally, when they were supposed to play Illinois, they had a bye week built in after. And I wonder how much that would have helped this year. But again, a what if that we won't know the answer to. But yeah, the bye week, they needed it. They needed it earlier, but it's good that it's happening now.
Yeah. For what it's worth, Northwestern had a bye week after that one. They turn around, lose to Duke and FCS Southern Illinois last week. So if anything, I don't think that says anything about the bye week, more about the quality of those 2 programs that we saw in week 0. So make up your own mind about what that means about Nebraska and Northwestern. But yeah, it's one of those things too, where if you're a player who's been in this program for a couple of years, you're 1-3 right now. You're staring at another losing season. It takes a lot out of you. So I think in particular this week is a lot about the mental side of things, just being able to refocus. Mickey, he's been saying this message all the time. When he first took over, we got 9 games left. Now on Tuesday, he said, we got 8 games left. You got the full Big Ten slate. Really, yep, indeed. Really, you have to put the 1-3 start behind you to a certain degree. Yes, learn from it, but ultimately, you can only take the version of yourself into Big Ten play that you can build up now over the next week and a half.
Yeah, the Big Ten West is so bad.
Let's get into it. Nice transition there.
They're so bad.
But obviously, yeah, we got the chance to see these Big Ten teams now, 3 weeks. Most of these teams have 3 games under their belt. And so far, I'm thinking Minnesota is the best team in the Big Ten West. We're going to agree or disagree, true, false.
Who else would it be?
You could still say Wisconsin even after that stinker.
Yeah, I guess I say that, and then I'm thinking Minnesota is 3-0, but they beat 3 really bad teams.
Yeah.
So I can't believe someone has to win this division. Oh, that Big Ten conference title game could be so ugly. Oh, God. I'm not ready.
Yeah, it's pretty much like you go down the list, too, and it's like, Wisconsin, they don't have the same offensive strength that they've had. Purdue, yes, Aiden O'Connell is a monster, but, their game plan is just throw the ball 50, 55 times a game, see what sticks. Got Iowa that has
No offense.
amazing defense, but no offense. You know, it's really, I mean, those are the teams you were kind of looking at the start of the year going, oh yeah, somebody will break through and look good out of there. Well, yeah, Minnesota 3-0. There you go.
Like,
there's the front runner.
Misleading 3-0. Like, they beat
Yeah.
Colorado pretty bad, but again, Colorado has one of the worst defenses in the Power 5. Their head coach probably will get canned at some point. Yeah, not great. And then their 2 other wins were against pretty bad teams too.
Yep. Well, it's going to be a big one for them coming up, starting off the Big Ten slate. And let's talk a few more Nebraska specific statements here, see if we agree or disagree, true or false. So this one's a very, very noteworthy one. We heard today that the Board of Regents will be voting about whether to allow alcohol sales at Pinnacle Bank Arena. So let's pose the question, should there be alcohol sales at Memorial Stadium? What do you think?
Yep.
I think so too. Bring in the money. Bring in the money, people.
Yeah, I did a story. So I was an LSU beat reporter when they changed their alcohol policy. They brought in so much money.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't even funny. Like, they were running out of alcohol for the first couple of games. It was nuts. Because they just didn't plan, I guess. But they planned for it now, and it's so much money. And especially after COVID and all of those things that, affect an athletic department's budget, you need anytime you can get any amount of help there, and buyouts.
Yeah, I mean,
obviously the money pool is different, but when you can make money after losing money, it'll help. And plus, like, obviously, yes, I understand the people who don't want it to happen. There'll be more alcohol-related incidents and whatever. Those are already happening.
Exactly.
Yeah. You just have to hope and ensure and train the people who are selling the alcohol not to sell to visibly intoxicated people, just like you do at a bar. And we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
But, this is not a new concept.
Yeah.
Like, any professional sporting event you go to, there's alcohol there. A lot of college athletics events, there's alcohol there. Like, yeah, I get it. I get the concerns, but people are getting drunk beforehand too.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, hopefully that'll stop people from, having to load up before they go into the stadium if you take that out of the equation.
Maybe they'll be more responsible. No.
Well, hey, maybe the student section will stick around a little bit longer. That's the other thing. I mean, if you're watching a losing football team, which Nebraska is right now, it might help keep people in the stadium a little bit longer, a little bit more of a selling point, the amenities. And yeah, like you said, I think obviously that was kind of the major concern heading in, fan behavior, but we've seen other schools, we've seen that throughout the country. I don't think it's a major deterrent at this point. So
yeah, and this fan base is supposed to be one of the best, right?
Mm-hmm. Let's prove it then. So
yeah, prove it.
All right, on to the next one. So obviously we know Nebraska is going to be looking for a new head coach at the end of the year. Well, right now, but at the end of the year too. Yeah. And obviously some other jobs will pop up before then. Hard to say. Obviously, we know Auburn, Harston's on the hot seat. There'll be other schools.
Herm Edwards already out.
Yep, that's a good one. Good knowledge there. The Pac-12, my bad. But obviously, there will be other vacancies that come about.
Colorado, West Virginia.
Yeah,
probably.
So I guess the question
Georgia
is,
Tech.
Will Nebraska be among the most desirable vacancies out there?
I think so, just because a lot of the really big jobs came open last year. Like, in what world do Notre Dame, USC, LSU, and Oklahoma come open at the same time?
A crazy offseason. That's what.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those schools aren't going to be changing, unless something crazy happens. But so right now, like I was saying when I was interrupting you, Nebraska and Arizona State are open. Auburn will probably come open within the next couple of weeks. Colorado, West Virginia, Georgia Tech will probably come open either before the end of the season or at the end of the season. And so when you look at those programs, are any of them better? Are they the same? Like, how do we, I mean, that's the big question for all potential, coaches for any of these vacancies. How do they view this job? Mm-hmm. Do they view it as it's a school in the Big Ten when, 5 years from now, it's going to be, this 2-conference supremacy idea between the Big Ten and the SEC? How much stock are they putting in that? Or do they look at, well, Nebraska hasn't won in a long time, I don't want to go there. Or Nebraska hasn't won in a long time, I'm going to fix it. Like, it just depends on, like, the mentality of that. And just knowing what I know, I feel like Nebraska is, like, one of the most attractive jobs out of those, like, 5 or 6 schools that I named.
No, I agree with you. I mean, obviously there's an outside chance, Saban and Dabo, go to the NFL, something insane happens.
Yeah, of course.
You never know. Obviously, there'll be those schools out there that would automatically be above Nebraska. But I think at this point in time, I agree with you. I think it's pretty comfortable to say it'll at least be kind of in that elite tier, because especially if you're looking at coaches thinking about, what's the place where I can have the highest ceiling, achieve the greatest results. I mean, Nebraska, they've been getting, top 20, top 25 recruiting classes. They should be able to compete for the Big Ten West, should be able to compete for conference championships. So I think any prospective coach is going to see those, potential. Obviously we got the new facility coming in here too. A lot of different things go into that equation, and I think all of those things will kind of help boost Nebraska in the national profile. And as we look, for this coaching search, obviously we know it's not going to be a quick one. It's going to take a while to work through all those candidates. And obviously, I mean, anybody who's on a staff right now, they're going to respect that, finish out the year as they need to. But ultimately, you're looking at, after that Iowa game, how quickly can Nebraska get its next head coach in charge? And I'll say the date. I'll say December 1st. Do you think Nebraska has a head coach by then?
I think it's going to take just a little bit longer.
Yeah. Because, I mean, bowl games, conference championships, you don't know what the candidate is going to be doing at that time.
I'm going to say we will have a press conference done by the 10th of December.
Well, I'm going to go against you. I'm going to stay on this prediction. I'm going to say whoever it is.
We may know who it is, but accepted the job, plane down, feet down, press conference before the 10th of December. I'm saying
December 1st. They'll be ready to go after week 12.
This is your first rodeo, isn't it?
I mean, like I said, it depends. Bowl game, conference championship. It's those are big things.
Or if
for
they
schools.
want somebody who's in the NFL, then that takes longer too.
Good point. Well, maybe I should talk about our three-person list. We've heard national reporting. We've heard these names, obviously, locally floated around, discussed as the top candidates. So will one of these 3 coaches, Bill O'Brien, Matt Campbell, or Lance Leipold, will they be Nebraska's next head coach?
At this stage, it feels like that's likely, unless there's like an outside contender that comes in later. Out of those 3, I'm going to lean more toward Campbell and Leipold. But that's just my gut feeling.
Yeah.
Not to discount Bill O'Brien's credentials or anything like that, but he hasn't been a head coach in the college ranks in a decade. That's a really long time. A lot has changed. Yes, he's back in the college game now, working at, the Nick Saban school for rejected coaches to rehab them. But yeah, I mean, he was in the NFL for a lot before that. And it's such a different game. I mean, Saban himself knows that. He's considered one of the best coaches in college football history. The NFL was not kind to him. So, I don't know. It would be cool. Bill O'Brien's a great coach. But can he be a head coach in college again? I don't know. Maybe. But as far as Matt Campbell goes, that one's really interesting to me because you hear on both sides, right? Like, Iowa State hasn't done a lot under him, blah, blah, blah. I've done more than Nebraska lately. And when you listen to Trev, we can't be talking about championships. We have to talk about, getting the small things right and moving forward. Under Campbell and Lance, you can do that. As far as Lance goes, I'm a KU grad, so I'm a little biased. I love what he's doing, rock chalk, but they're 3-0.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Anyway, he hasn't been there for very long. And so how do you view what's happening there? Is it a fluke? Like, can they contend for the Big 12 title? I don't think so, but he hasn't been at Kansas very long. He has, turned around programs everywhere he's been. He's won at every level. But if you want somebody with extensive Power 5 experience, I don't know if that's Lance. But again, I don't know what Trev is thinking. I would love to know what Trev is thinking.
Wouldn't we all, huh?
But yeah, so that's just where I'm at right now.
No, I think I agree with you. I think you look at these three coaches, and you mentioned it. They've all done, they've all done different things, but they've all been able to take a program that was really going through a tough time and make it better, which is exactly what Nebraska needs right now. So yes, I mean we can see a wild card. We can see somebody come through the ranks. We've heard Matt Rule. You mentioned the NFL aspect. I mean, he did a great job at Baylor. In a very similar circumstance as well. Again, a program that needed a lot of work, to get back to where they had been. So those are the names. I think we'll continue hearing those three for the next few months, which is kind of the scary thing, though. I feel like we're going to be stuck in this endless loop for a few weeks.
It's Groundhog Day.
Say what? Come on, say it again. Well,
I will close with this though on that point. I think Nebraska would be in a good spot with any of those three.
I agree.
For whatever their faults, what's lacking in their resume, what's good in their resume, like any one of those three, I think Nebraska would be okay with. But also, Mickey Joseph hasn't done enough to lose the job yet. Mm-hmm. He is still considered, right? If they turn things around, I don't know if they will, but it's technically a possibility. When does he drop out of contention? That's another thing I would love to know.
That is, I think it's going to take a lot of wins, obviously.
Yeah. But who, on the flip side, who would be able to turn it around? Without free agency, without that. Like, it's a really hard spot to be in. And I feel like him firing Chenander tells me that he wants it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the other thing too, obviously the on-field results are going to be a very important thing in this search, but how much progress does he make in changing the team's mentality? How much behind the scenes stuff, that we're not necessarily seeing. We're not seeing the stuff that they do on a day-to-day basis.
No, Miles Farmer made that very clear.
So I think that'll be perhaps what he's judged by on Alberts more so than the on-the-field stuff, because he's been seeing the way this team culture has been kind of sliding back. It's been degrading. How much can Mickey restore that in a few months' time? Again, it's a big challenge, but if he can make significant progress in that regard, I think that'll give him a boost up for sure.
Yeah, you don't see it very often. It does happen. Interim coaches getting the job. Ed Ogeron, who Mickey has worked under before, one of those guys. So we'll see. We're going to be in for a long couple of months, though, aren't we?
Indeed. Yeah, we'll probably have an update for you next week. We'll get into all the Indiana previews. We'll talk a little volleyball. I'm sure they start off the Big Ten slate this weekend here at home at the Devaney Center, but for now, I mean, enjoy your bye week, enjoy your week off, and thank you all again for tuning into episode 8 of Life in the Red. For Amie Just, I've been Luke Mullin. Thank you all, and we'll see you next week.